yourselves doing or thinking something particularly patriarchal and then spend the next hours spiraling, wondering if that thought or action made us a so-called bad feminist. But I want you to pause for just a second and define what a bad feminist is. If a bad feminist is someone who makes a mistake once in a while and falls into the trap of a system that has been integrated into their brains for God knows how many years, then there would be no good feminists left. Every feminist would be a bad feminist. Hi guys, this is Amy. Welcome back to Who Does She Think She Is, a podcast where we understand the patriarchy, understand who benefits from it, and dismantle it all with a side of tea. And today's episode is all gonna be about, we're gonna be talking about the right way to be a feminist, and we're gonna talk about if such a thing even exists. In today's world, digital spaces are such an important part of our lives. We know that no one can survive without social media. But these spaces have turned activism into a bit of a minefield. We're living in the era of cancel culture, where a single poorly phrased tweet or a misunderstood comment from 5 years ago can be enough to get someone permanently written off. While the original intent was accountability, it's evolved into a climate of hypervigilance. We are not just fighting the patriarchy anymore. We're fighting the fear that if we aren't the perfect version of the feminist, every walking, talking second will be the next on the chopping block. All of this gotcha culture, it has created a massive, chilling effect. Instead of having the messy, honest conversations required for real growth, many of us just stay silent. We are so terrified of offending someone or using the wrong terminology that we've traded authentic progress for performative safety. When the fear of being cancelled outweighs the desire to learn, we stop moving forward. We forget that feminism is a practice, not a performance. And that a movement with no room for mistakes is a movement that has no room for people. And of course, I'm not saying that people should not be held accountable for what they do. They should. But what I'm trying to say is that simply people make mistakes. Making mistakes is human, and frankly, you shouldn't beat yourself up about it. We know that the patriarchy is a well-schemed system that has been with the human society for thousands and thousands of years. You've grown up seeing the system in practice everywhere, in your families, in your schools, in the society, literally everywhere. And of course, we all have unwillingly internalized some of it. Thus, it is so normal for you, me, and all of us to have a moment of relapse and fall back into the system and have a patriarchal thought or the reaction. Like, like you could say, like judging a woman for the way she dresses without meaning to, or feeling guilty for wanting or enjoying something ultra traditional and feminine. But the thing that you and we all need to remember is the fact that after having that thought or reaction or whatever, we realize that we were wrong. And that is the biggest thing. That is what matters. The fact that you recognize what you felt or did or thought wasn't right. This realization means that you recognize the wrongness and are willing to make it right. A system that has lasted for centuries cannot be broken in a few decades or even in a lifetime. But what we can do is take the baby steps required to. You cannot just simply unlearn everything that's been taught to you over all of these decades in a year or two. But what you can do is grow. And this growth, it comes from making those mistakes and those relapses and then recognizing them, and then deciding to try your best to not repeat them. This is where growth comes from. So making mistakes is so essential. It's not something you need to beat yourself up about. Another thing that we need to keep in mind is the fact that people face discrimination in like many different ways. We talked about this in episode 2 where when we talked about intersectionality. A rich woman faces discrimination differently than a middle class or a poor woman. South Asian woman, she faces discrimination differently than a European woman. So if no two people face discrimination in the same way, then their concepts of feminism will not be the same either. A rich woman's way of practicing feminism will ultimately be different than that of a poor woman's. A poor woman, she might not have the resources to practice feminism in the same grand way as a rich woman does. So she might choose to practice it in like small moments of life. Similarly, a working woman's way of expressing feminism will be different than that of a woman who chooses to stay at home. And if there are so many ways of expressing and practicing feminism, then we cannot say what is the right way to do it. Because frankly, who are we to decide that? An issue that is so important to us might not be just as important to someone else. In fact, they might not even care about it. But that doesn't make the issue any less important. This is the same case with feminism and its expressions. The way we choose to express and practice feminism might be a huge step for us, but it might not mean just as much to someone else. But that doesn't mean that that is not a right way to express and or practice feminism. Next comes the discussion of performing versus practicing feminism. Like we talked about before, today's cancel culture, it has placed such a huge pressure on all of us to say the right thing and be perfect, which leads us to falling for the trap of performative feminism. And why I want to talk about performative feminism in this context is because when we spend so much time trying to look good and trying to be a perfect feminist by I don't know, posting another right quote and promoting yet another feminist literature book, when all of our time it's spent on this, on performing to be a perfect feminist, we don't actually have time left for practicing feminism. If you spend all your time promoting that feminist literature book, then you won't have time to actually read and understand it, which was supposed to be the goal. So you end up not doing the one thing you actually wanted to do. I'm not saying that it's wrong to post quotes or promote books, because feminism is about having the freedom to choose, and choosing social media activism and promoting feminist literature as your way of expressing feminism is completely right as well. Because, like we said, there is no right way to be a feminist. However, what I am talking about here is that you should not feel pressured to perform feminism to prove yourself or your worth. That brings us to the next point. We've talked about performative feminism. Now let's talk about activist feminism. What is activist feminism? To say simply, activist feminism is basically practicing feminism, where in performative feminism you express feminist thoughts or and like take up the activist aesthetics to prove yourself or like look good in front of others. In activist feminism, you do those things because you know it's something you should do and that is the right thing to do, and like basically you're doing it for yourself and not putting on a performance for anyone else. But active feminist or activist feminism, it's not always about it doesn't always look like participating in a strike or holding a rally or hosting a campaign. Sometimes it's about speaking up against that one sexist relative, or it looks like refusing to apologize for things that you don't really need to apologize for in the first place. It's also about setting a boundary when someone is being disrespectful instead of smiling, trying to be likable. It's about prioritizing your own comfort above others for once, or simply about taking a stance and refusing to move while walking on a sideway just to let a man pass. It doesn't have to be big and flashy, and honestly, most of the time, it isn't. It's simple, small practices that we take and do in our daily lives. Now, the problem with all of this cancel culture and like trying to be the best feminist and nitpicking each other at everything is the fact that it diverts all of our attention from the bigger picture. In the end, it doesn't matter if someone for once used the wrong terminology in their last Instagram post, or if they did something small that they later realized was low-key misogynistic. But what does matter is that we are spending our time judging and criticizing them to the point that they lose their self-confidence and stop speaking up at all. And the problem with all of this fighting is the fact that this fighting doesn't benefit us, but instead benefits the very system that we're trying to dismantle. Because every hour we spend arguing over who is feminist enough is an hour that we do not spend looking at the bigger picture. Making mistakes is a very human quality. It's a very human thing to do. And these are the mistakes, same mistakes that we make are the ones that help us grow. These are the mistakes we learn from. So perhaps when we are both fighting the same fight against the very same system, we should perhaps be a little more forgiving and lenient with each other and honestly ourselves too. We should be forgiving to ourselves too of making a little mistake, having a little slip up. It's honestly not the end of the world, because when we're so busy fighting a war on the horizontal, attacking people standing right next to us and ourselves too, we stop looking at the vertical, at the actual systems, structures, laws, and biases that keep us all down. If we're all exhausted from policing each other and ourselves, then it's no good. Because an exhausted movement is a movement that cannot create change. We have to stop being each other's hall monitors and start being each other's allies. Because in the end, it's not you against me, but us against the system. And that is a wrap on the seventh episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys had as much fun listening to it as I had talking about it. And this was a very fun episode to make. And yeah, well, I hope you guys have a good day. And thank you so much for staying until the end. Bye.